Welcome to your friendly neighborhood historian, where we discuss just enough history to inform, intrigue, and entertain. I'm Bill Petro. The history of New Year's resolutions. Where did they begin? As I mentioned in my previous podcast about New Year's Day, celebrations began in pre-Christian times, beginning with the Babylonians in March, but later changed to January by the Romans. Where did we get the idea of New Year's resolutions, and why are they at the beginning of the year? About 4,000 years ago, the Babylonians held a 12-day festival to celebrate their new year. This Mesopotamian festival of Akitu survived the subsequent Neo-Assyrian Empire, the Seleucid Empire, that's one of Alexander the Great's generals, and into the Roman Empire period. But in the Babylonian calendar, the new year followed the vernal equinox in the spring. Consequently, their resolutions included the assurance that they would return borrowed farm tools, pay any debts, and pray for favorable crops. Later, in Rome, January is dedicated to the Roman god who gave it its name, Janus, or in Latin, Janus. This is the two-faced deity who looks backward to the old year and forward into the new year. His feast day, the Aganalia, is on January the 9th. Janus was also the patron and protector of arches, which the Latin word for that is Janus. He was also the patron of transitions, time, gates, doors, doorways, endings, and beginnings. But he was also the patron of bridges. His statue, which is pictured with this podcast, is set on the bridge of Ponte Fabricio, which crosses the Tiber River from Rome to Tiber Island. It survives today from the original construction in 62 BC during the time of Julius Caesar. Even today, touching the Janus head as you cross the bridge is believed to bring good fortune, which is why it is so well worn now. Romans made New Year resolutions with a moral flavor, mainly to be good to others. However, when the Roman Empire took Christianity as its official state religion in the 4th century, these moral intentions were replaced by prayers and fasting. For example, Christians chose to observe the Feast of Circumcision of Christ on January 1st instead of the revelry otherwise indulged in by those who did not share the faith. This replacement had varying degrees of success over the centuries, as Christians hesitated to observe some of the New Year practices associated with honoring the pagan god Janus. During the medieval era, knights took a peacock vow, placing their hands on either a live peacock or a roasted bird at the end of Christmastide each year. They did this to reaffirm their commitment to the code of chivalry for the next year, appropriate to the order to which they belonged. They would then decorate their helmets with plumes. This practice went back to the late 18th and early 19th century of Charlemagne and his men-at-arms called the Paladins. For centuries, several Christian traditions have held watch night services or vigils late on New Year's Eve, the 7th day of Christmastide, ahead of January 1st, the Feast of the Circumcision of Christ. This allows Christians to review the year that has passed, make confessions, and then prepare for the year ahead by praying and making resolutions. Even as recently as the 17th century, Puritans in colonial America, much like the earlier English Puritans, avoided the indulgences associated with New Year's celebrations and other holidays. In the 18th century, Puritans avoided even naming Janus. Instead, they called January the first month. Instead, the Puritans urged their children to skip that revelry, reflect on the year past, and contemplate the year to come. In this way, they again adopted the old custom of making resolutions. These were enumerated as commitments to employ their talents better, treat their neighbors with charity, and avoid habitual sins. The great American theologian and preacher, Jonathan Edwards, who was raised in New England Puritan culture, took the writing of resolutions to an art form in the early 18th century. However, he did not write his resolutions on a single day. Instead, during a 2-year period when he was about 19 or 20, after graduating from Yale, he compiled some 70 resolutions on various aspects of life, which he committed to reviewing each week. Here are just 3 of them. Resolved, in narrations, never to speak anything but the pure and simple verity. That means truth. Resolved, never to speak evil of any, except I have some particular good call for doing so. Thirdly, resolved always to do what I can toward making, maintaining, and establishing peace when it can be done without overbalancing detriment in other respects. So, how do your resolutions compare? Thank you for listening. I'm Bill Petro, your friendly neighborhood historian. You can find more details on this topic and others on my website at billpetro.com.